representing 63 million South Africans here in this beautiful country of India. But more than that, I also see my role as representing the continent of Africa, which stand toe to toe with you because they are also 1.4 billion people. So that is how we equalize this discrepancy, the disparity between us. But I'm here representing the land of Mandela and the land that gave you the Mahatma Gandhi. So happy to be here amongst friends. I served previously in New York on the Security Council. I worked for the UN as a representative in Botswana, worked on the G20 for many years, and also on peace and security issues. But my best career move was coming to India, the most vibrant country, all the roads and networks, since we're dealing with software, all networks leads to India, and it's wonderful to be here in this juncture. You just had Raisina dialogues that attracted so many speakers and decision makers and policy formulators. So all the roads lead to India, and I'm happy to be stationed here and to be interacting with all of you. And looking forward, Madam Moderator, to our engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are hoping for a very exciting session. As you know, it's about foreign direct investment from India. We talk a lot about inbound foreign direct investment into the country, but the whole idea or the premise behind this panel is the impact of Indian investment in different countries of the world. And we're going to hear from each of our experts on their views as well as what opportunities exist for Indian companies in their markets so that we continue the flow of business investment across borders. So I'm going to start by asking each of you to maybe give a general landscape of the current trade and investment between your country and India. We can start with you, Dipakshi, since you're representing the United States for this discussion. What do you have to say about the US-India trade and investment relationship?
So I'd say, I think just to set the context, right, I think since 2015, India and US have been really strategic partners for over a decade now. While there's a lot of conversation and when you, let's say, read the op-eds and the larger opinions, you would often hear that there's a lot of strategic partnership, but not a lot has gotten on the ground. The facts state otherwise. And primarily, if I were just to look at the granularity of investments or the quantum of investments, the US is India's largest trading partner today. And at the same point in time, when we talk about US terms, India is one of the top 10 largest trading partners in the US with, and again, if you will just do a very, very macro level dissection of the larger trade partners, India is still relatively minuscule. Despite that, the most interesting fact is India is net positive when it comes to trade with the US. And again, while there are a lot of reasons, and of course, up until the run-up for the next 3-4 weeks is really going to put a lot of scanner on the discussions around trade and tariffs and agreements and free market routes. It's interesting to note that there is a very unique complementarity between the two nations. On the one hand, when we talk about what US imports from India, it's a lot of engineering goods, which might be on the lower end of the spectrum, but they really create the bulk of these imports to the US. There's a lot of electronics goods, which has been a recent succession, I would say, over the last 3 to 4 years, if you were just to look at the trend analysis. One of the biggest, in terms of value contributions, the gems and jewelry is a lot more. And not that surprisingly, but when we talk about the IT technology, software, services, it does form part of the top 5, but from the looks of it, it should have been the top 2. It is not. And that's purely from the margins and purely from the larger balance between the trade, right? On the other hand, when we look at the US imports into India, technology, other than patents and other than larger technology, I would say, strongholds, is mainly dominated by things around mineral fuels, semi-precious jewelry, nuclear reactors, and that is where, just taking it at a step beyond, that is where when we today, Julie, look at when President Trump and Prime Minister Modi met, one of the first agreements they really came up with was compact, which is around defense. And that really, anything strategic, when it comes to trusted corridors, when it comes to defense, those in the coming future are really expected to be the larger market pullers. And I'll keep it brief as an introduction, so I'll pass it.
Thank you for that. And just to supplement that with some numbers, it may seem like relatively India makes smaller investment in the United States compared to other countries, but that investment in 2023 was still $17 billion, which makes India the third largest investor amongst the BRICS countries into the United States, which is significant from that point of view, from the potential point of view. But I will move on to Japan, and I know that traditionally Indian investment to Japan has been modest. So now I'd like to hear your opinion on that, and then maybe also looking into the future. You said you're waiting. What will maybe help you arrive?
Okay. So the business between Japan and India. So I don't know, India is on the maybe top 12 or top 13 and the trading partner for Japan. But still, China is one of the big contributor for Japanese market. And then now we export and lots of machinery. So that is completely related to manufacturing industry and from Japan to here. And then we have some kind of the FDI from India to Japan. That is mostly for the ITs, like on the PCS or the Infosys or these kinds. But I think that we still have more opportunity to expand the bulk of the site. So that is for sure. And of course, in the past several years, so this kind of trading volume is increasing. But the growth percentage is not so much. We need to consider is how we can contribute from each other. So that is one of the key.
I just wanted to make a point about foreign direct investment. Most countries, and I have an economic development background myself, we're always looking to attract business into our jurisdictions. However, it is really a two-way street. When one company invests in another country, both parties actually benefit. The country from where the investment is coming also benefits. So it's not a net zero game. So just wanted to sound that out there. And even though outbound FDI from India to Japan might be low, India has benefited from Japanese Africa, Mr. Crowley, and you said that you're actually a spokesperson for all of Africa, so feel free to add that into your response.
No, thank you very much. You know that I think that there's in addition to the artificial intelligence, AI also stands for India and Africa. Economic growth in this century will be driven by India and Africa in the main. If you want markets, it will be these two economies. Of course, we represent 55 countries, so it's more than the 55. But we can say two economies because of the Continental Free Trade Agreement that has been signed. That will create one market, and that will allow investors that have a footprint in the country and that meets the rules of origin requirements to access a market of millions of people. And the middle class in Africa is increasing, it's growing. You need this market for your products. Europe's population growth is in the decline. Some of your neighbors, their populations are declining. So Africa is your natural partner. The importance of Africa was underscored by Prime Minister Modi ji when he addressed the Ugandan Parliament, and he elevated this relationship to a strategic partnership. Now you see, my sense is that good bilateral and political relationships are important for economic and trade relationships. And we have seen subsequently the increase in terms of trade from India to Africa, and vice versa. There's been all kinds of business people traveling into India because they realize this is where their future also lies. So I think there is a solid foundation because of the solidarity and the wonderful political relations that exist between our countries. That creates the foundation. Secondly, it's the market. And we have the land, for example, in the area of agriculture. Prime Minister Modi underscored the importance of investment in agro-processing so that Africa can become sustainable itself for its food needs. But then it's also a very sophisticated market with many youth like India, and they like technology. And so the future of technology in India and Africa is bright, and those kinds of investments are important. We also have all the important critical minerals. That is important to drive this technological transformation. But as Africa puts it, we don't only want to be exporting raw material to other countries. We want to beneficiate. And if some ministers, of which India is a part, acknowledge that, and they said that beneficiation should happen at the point of source, in the countries of source. And I think that political commitment bodes well for future investment from India and elsewhere into the continent, especially in the critical mineral space, but also in terms of manufacturing and investment in infrastructure. Because for the continental free trade area to be effective, we need investment in road infrastructure, in our ports, we need fantastic telecommunications, the banking infrastructure. So, I mean, this continent is open for investment. The legal frameworks are there to secure investors and their investments in the country. And I think that this partnership will only grow from strength to strength. And we welcome all kinds of investments into the continent.
Thank you. And I'll just stay with you since you talked about the benefits coming to the source, right? So yes, there's mining, but that's just getting raw material. Where do you see immediate benefits for people in our audience that may be interested in? And I'm not going to say Africa. I think that's insensitive to just club it as one region. So let's talk about South Africa. In South Africa, where do you see potential for investment that has higher and faster returns? Because that is what appeals to investors.
No, I think it depends on, especially in your area of focus. But in the technology space, for example, we have made a commitment to digitize for DPI, etc. Most of our companies use Indian ICT companies in terms of services. So all our retailers, top 5, top 10 banks, they use Indian companies. But the importance would also be to have a footprint within the country and continent so that we can also develop the human capabilities and human resources so that it becomes a win-win situation. So in as much as most of the work is currently done here in India on behalf of those clients, we also want to see that footprint extended into that terrain. And once you are there, our economies as the Southern African Customs Union is a configuration of 5 countries. You automatically have access to those because those banks are also, and retailers are also in those jurisdictions. So I think that the other important thing is in mining. Vedanta, for example, invested in mines in the Northern Cape, and they have made that mine very profitable. Where others thought it was not profitable to invest. So mining is obviously an important area. ICT, medicine, especially in pharmaceutics, because we import most of our medicine from India, and after COVID we realized how vulnerable we are in terms of supply chains. And the continent, and South Africa was identified as one of those countries that must drive this investment so that we have the production capabilities and the research capabilities on the continent. So I think pharmaceutics, ICT, infrastructure, mining, those are all important segments.
Absolutely, and I can't agree with you more on the footprint comments that you made. Again, like I said, because my background is in economic development, yes, you can export, and that's often the first step when you internationalize. However, the potential when you actually have a presence in the host country is immense, and it increases manifold. So a number of companies don't realize and wrongly think of investment as an expense, whereas it's not. It's actually an investment, and the returns are much more rewarding in that case.
You know, I forgot one important industry, and that's the automotive industry. How can I forget that? But all of the exports to our country and the presence of some of your companies there, I think that's also because you see increasingly as the middle class grows in the country, and especially your light vehicles is dominating the market. Even the heavier vehicles that are coming in, that's used in mining, the tractors that you have, I mean, those are all important investments that you've already made. Medicines, for example, Medicines Neravi is the name of the company. They are because, I mean, no one talks about them, but that's such an important company in terms of the infrastructure that you need, the parts and components for vehicles. So they are already there. So any future company that are from India that invest there, they have that service and supply chain from one of your biggest companies, which no one knows about, but does amazing work, whether it's for the top car producers. So they already have a presence there, and they're expanding, and so we're very happy about that kind of industry.
Thank you. I'll move to the US then. What would you consider, Nipakshi, and not just the usual suspects, but other trending, important, potential industries where the US has strength and there is synergy with the United States and India?
So I think rather than getting to the symptoms, I'll first get to the cause, right? And that is about, I would say, relative strengths vis-a-vis the rest of the world, right? When we talk about very strong academic research, both at a fundamental as well as at an applied level, that's traditionally been a US stronghold. As a country, the percentage of investments that really go into R&D, and again, not when I talk about that as DNA, it's not just specific to the country, but it's also then percolates down to most of the economies or most of the industries that contribute significantly to the GDP. When you talk about healthcare and pharmaceuticals, a major share of global balance are today held in the US. You talk about innovations in financial services, right from insurance to literally, what's really coming up next in financial services, typically originate from the US. We talk about today, let's say, the technology, again from the lens of patents, not from the lens of manufacturing. The mere fact that there is strong industry, academia, government partnership, that creates that synergy for US's stronghold to where it is today. And coming to the symptoms. Today when we talk about, and again, as a policy specialist, I'm going to give it a slight world policy view, because I think geopolitics plays a big role in US's position of strength today. We talk about, and again, I've covered technology for now almost 12 years, so I might be more intelligible about technology-focused trades here. But picking on to Mr. Crowley's hint on the resilient supply chains, right? A big chunk of global manufacturing really was coming in from a particular country nation. Post-COVID, I think the world, and not just the US, realized the need for diversifying supply chains, really expanding the footprint of where not just end products, but even components are getting manufactured. From there, if I were to now today talk about where most, again, in Southeast Asia or let's say in the MENA region, want to diversify out of China, China Plus One has been one of the very important mandates that has now started to favor the US technologies. Specifically, I would say in terms of silicon, I would say in terms of equipment that goes into production of technology. I would say in terms of automotive designs, when we talk about design and engineering, and that is where host of the margins really sit, that comes out of the US today. In terms of competitive advantages, it therefore is a triangulation of these three arenas. R&D, geopolitical advantage, and the fact that there are green shoots on manufacturing that have already started to delve, right? Today, and I'll use an anecdotal reference. There's something called critical information infrastructure, right? Most of the people in this room, I'm assuming, would be aware of the critical information infrastructure. It's pretty much anything that is going to bring your country down to its knees if it is infested or if it is attacked. There's a lot of conversation globally around how do we create trust in critical information infrastructure, and which means if majority of the silicon or if majority of the components come out of a particular country, it's not a very resilient position that the world is in today.
In the conference room.
With a lot of fabrication
come?
units, with a lot of assembly lines, with a lot of component manufacturers now moving into the US, there is an alternative which earlier was none. When we look at even, why I'm starting with silicon and I'm going to link it to the various industries where US's strength would lie. Defense, focused on custom silicon. You don't want your silicon to be compromised with any other country. And when I say custom silicon, every country can actually come in and work with the US, with US Department of Defense almost also, in loop when we talk about the export controls and sanctions, about what technology can go where. Not just defense, let's talk about let's talk about healthcare equipment, the precision equipment. US is the mainstay today of even equipment manufacturers. Manufacturing output might not be very strong, but the equipment imprint on the machinery and the equipment, I would say, trade across the world, US has that stronghold, right? And the last but not the least, if I were just to go back into the emerging technology space, you have space, which again is pretty much determined by two nations in the world today. US is one of those. You have defense, like I've already spoken about it, but an offshoot of defense is also aerospace and the innovations in aerospace. Again, an offshoot of technology, but so much more than just what hardware is, to the next rise in supercomputing. We always talk about the fourth industrial revolution. We always talk about moving in from just steam to agriculture and to now finally being in the information age. The largest supercomputer designs are coming out of the US today. Of course, there have been surprises sprung by China, and very validly so, when we talk about the small language models versus the large language models. But all these pieces, when you look at together, that one arena where US's dominance is still maintained is technology and the various industries that get their competitive edge through technology. Long answer, Julie, but yeah.
And a valid one. Thank you so much, Bakshi. And yes, I think we all understand the technological advances that the United States has. But you yourself mentioned that, I'm going to put manufacturing aside because we have the experts in manufacturing right here. So I'd love to hear from you, Naho, about, Japan has given us so much, and not just in manufacturing technology, but also management. So please elaborate a little bit on the industries where there are opportunities in Japan for Indian businesses.
Okay, so in Japan, so of course, the manufacturing is one of the strong part, and not only for the automotive, but also the several the factory-related automations, and nowadays sometimes the like the energy efficiency and the plenty of the industries that we also have. And especially in the manufacturing and the machineries, and that is one of the strongest part for Japanese company. And as she mentioned about the China Plus One, so after before the COVID time, so what most of the Japanese company was thinking is how we can come into the Indian market. Then how we can get the market share in India, how we can increase the company's turnover. But then, after the COVID, so we started to think about the China Plus. Then now again we have the new concept because of the geopolitics. So it is in the what we start to think about is in the okay. Let's think India can be the manufacturing hub for Japanese corporates. Then how we can connect into these kind of the roads toward to next global south. It means that we make in India, then we export these kind of the items from India to Middle East and Africa. So these kind of the new concepts that we are discussing right now. So I think that is one part. And the second part, of course, we are talking about lots of things about the technology. And now we also need to implement these kind of technology to manufacturing industries. And sometimes we cannot say manufacturing is manufacturing, technology is technology. So we need to mix some kinds of the industry. And we need to cross the boundaries. So these kind of the context and how we can think about. So this is another opportunity which we can consider about.
Thank you. And just, with the premise that we keep it on the up and up and on the positive, there is a lot of, there is a trend towards make in America, make in India, come to Africa, make in Africa. How can we make it work with keeping the autonomy of the different countries and keeping their sustainability or self-resilience in place, but still increasing interactions between borders?
Thank you. I think it's an important question. I don't think necessarily there's a contradiction in saying make in India, make in US. Because what you need is a strong local footprint, which will allow you to eventually expand and invest in other markets. So those, I don't see it as a contradiction. I see as these companies grow domestically, they will eventually also export, want to increase their market, increase their exports, and eventually go and set up factory in other countries and jurisdictions. So I don't necessarily see there's a contradiction. I think it's good that, these multinationals that you see everywhere, they began in their local countries, developed themselves, and then eventually branched out to other countries and jurisdictions. And that is what I see happening also in India. Because companies are strong here, they can set up factories in Africa, in South Africa, and elsewhere. So no contradiction in that. I think as you grow domestically, you also want to increase your market, and that's where the market is. And the efficiency of your production will also determine whether it's easier or cheaper to export raw material from here or to manufacture there and then export. So I think there's synergies, and we don't feel threatened when countries look inward and say make in America, make in India, make in South Africa, make in Sudan, or wherever whatever the countries. Because countries have got needs, As much as we have inequality, as much as we have unemployment, you have the same challenges. And it would be irresponsible if you do not address your own challenges first and see how you can support your local population. But as you do that, you can also equally expand and assist other countries as they also grapple with the same challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. I will say, though, that part of what prompted this movement in different countries is also the pandemic and the realization that in order to be self-reliant, your supply chain needs to be secure. So are there any thoughts you have on that, on whether that becomes then a contradiction, the struggle between being self-reliant as a country, but then also increasing trade and investment?
Yeah, it's a very difficult one. I'm not always sure whether we can become completely self-reliant, because the comparative advantage that some countries have over others are real. They are there. So therefore we always, and as much as we want to ensure that, that supply chains are more diversified, you have to take cognizance of the fact that those that have got the competitive advantage, it's very difficult to replace them. And so ours is to seek a collaborative approach, to see those that have got the competitive advantage, how can we work with them so that they assist us in meeting at least our domestic needs, invest in R&D or collaborate in terms of developing research and technology, and eventually set up companies and factories in our jurisdictions. When it comes to pharmaceutics, which was, I think, as you rightly indicated, the driving force in terms of challenging this notion of, we take it for granted that because we are interdependent, we can rely on each other. And so when the COVID vaccine was developed, and we realized we cannot rely on each other because people become selfish and nationalistic in their approaches. That's why I think, increasingly, what is happening is that you find countries that have shared histories and have trust, like BRICS countries, that seeking to collaborate a bit more so that they can ensure that their supply chains are secured. Equally in Africa, countries in the 5 regions that we have there, trying to collaborate so that they see how we can use each other and leverage each other's strength in working towards meeting our own needs. So regional supply chains become important, developing relationships with like-minded countries so that you don't become over-reliant on others is important. And the countries such as India has shown and demonstrated that in as much as they have struggled with curbing the effects of the pandemic, they were the first to make it available to others. I think it's because of your DNA as humans. You see others as humans and not necessarily see profits as the driving force. That's why we could, as India and South Africa, lead the pack in the World Trade Organization to have a relaxation of these intellectual property rights of the pharmaceuticals. And where did the resistance come from? Where did the support come from? And it was unfortunately not from the partners in the North. So, as countries of the South, we will celebrate the 70th birthday of Bandung, the non-aligned movement, the G77. I think it's quite important that we, as countries of the South, collaborate with each other and ensure that we address global challenges and national challenges together, including developing regional supply chains. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to change tracks a little bit here. Now I want to ask you specifically about Japan and the population in Japan. And one of the concerns for the country is workforce, of finding active workforce. And workforce is a huge draw when it comes to investment because people or companies follow where the workforce is. So could you tell us a little bit about workforce challenges and how they're being addressed in Japan currently?
So, right now, what Japan is facing is the population reducing and also the aging populations. So now, the Japanese average age is almost 40, 45, 46. I forgot, but something like the mid of the 40s. And there, that is the mid of the 20s. So huge differences. And then right now, even though we say about the population issue, the population or the workforce issues, we have some types of the issues. So one is, of course, we need more people to work in Japan, and that is not only for the tech people, but also the management. Because now, how many years I was waiting the more Japanese companies to be here or some more emerging countries. But I can see a few Japanese big corporates, they already invested, but not much. Yeah, so sometimes what is the shortage? if we have a very good management, or even though we have very good global leader, then we can bring the more Japanese corporates to outside. So I believe for that. And nowadays, what we could see is we have plenty of the Indian people who has who becomes a good CEO like in the Google or Microsoft, but not only for the ITs, but then also the financials or even the Chanel. So they have the Indian female CEO. So if we can invite more and more these kind of the global management talents to Japan, so I think it can be the good connection. That is one. And the two is actually the Japanese people and Indian people, we have completely different characters. So and the Indian is very good for the juga, right? But in the Japan, they are more for the perfection. So that is completely for the opposite, right? But now, because of these kind of the differences, so if we can combine these kind of the different strengths, how we can work it. So many times I also did lots of speech in front of the Japanese CEO. And sometimes what I told the Japanese CEO, so we need to change. The Japanese people, we need to change. But whenever I come to the speech in front of Indian people, I say, okay, you need to change, right? So both of the sides, and if we can understand and identify each other's strengths, then so that we can combine these kind of the different types of the characters. Then we also can think about how we can unite again. Then to make some more developments. So that is the second point which I'm thinking right now.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I think that's the underlying theme in what everybody on this platform is saying is it's about collaboration, and collaboration is a two-way street. And Dipakshi, I know that you have a time crunch. If you could just, from your view, and we'll continue the conversation, what do you see next for India and the United States?
If I were to sum up in one word, I think that would be complementarity. And I'm going to pick a leaf from what Mr. Crowley said, right? It's about competitive advantages. It's about relative strengths. But at the same point in time, it also needs to be about not the relative strength of today, but like Naho said, how it is going to translate into the next 5 to 6 years, right? Today, if I were just to talk again about the complementarity piece of it, purely from an economics perspective, India is labor intensive, the US is capital intensive. The mere fact that India is labor intensive doesn't mean that India doesn't have ambition to add value. And just because US is capital intensive, it doesn't mean that it doesn't need to support the middle class. And actually, a lot of people are entering the middle class. The Gini coefficient of US is also under attack. Having said that, how technologies are going to change the face of most of the industries, that is where complementarity is really going to come into play. Today when we talk about, let's say, artificial intelligence, it is going to change the nature of work. It is going to change the nature of jobs. It is going to change how we tax. It is going to change how we engage. And a lot of these global discussions, whether it is through OECD, which is now whether it is about the climate engagement, because there have been a couple of U-turns on climate and sustainability conversations, a lot of these parallels are really going to determine where the two countries take their trade, or for that matter, that complementarity, forget about the trade, but complementarity in development over the next decade. And I would say it's not just about a bilateral track, it has a more global imprint, and that is where platforms such as the Quad, platforms such as the Five Eyes, they really have an impact on how the policies pave way for better innovation. Because innovation and regulation will always be loggerheads. And at that, Julie, I will take your leave. Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Please, a round of applause for Dipakshi. We'll still continue the conversation. A small memento. Can't go without a memento. Okay. Thank you so much. to now again change gears a little bit. You know, it's all fair that you want to attract business investment. The U.S. wants to attract business investment, and we can talk a lot about market access and opportunity. But what about support? Especially, I was listening to the previous panel, and they were talking about small business wanting support and not getting access to it. And here's where this is my economic development hat that I'm wearing. Perhaps governments can do something to attract more international investment. So from South Africa, could you talk about certain policies, incentives, support for business investment?
No, thank you. I think that governments play an important role in terms of creating the enabling environment. And in the key sectors, they have got incentive programs, whether it's ICT, automotive, agro-processing. So there are some incentives that they have made available, whether it's in terms of taxes, the support that they are giving. I also saw the other day that our Minister of Finance, for example, for small businesses, this is also to develop the local capacities, making available something like 500 million rand in terms of financial support for small business development. Now, India has so many small businesses, and I think that sometimes we look at these big multinationals to link them with and ask them to come over there. But I think if there are collaboration between small business within India, linking it with especially female-led business in South Africa, because that's what we want to grow. We have done that also in our procurement legislation. When government procures, it must ensure that at least 30% of procurement go to these female-led businesses. So I think there are ways in which government can support bigger multinationals. Of course, there's this very wide-ranging incentive programs that the Department of Trade and Industry has available in key sectors, including ICT and agro-processing.
Thank you. I like that about, not only looking at the big business, and our U.S. expert has left, and I'm no U.S. expert, but I can say this from my prior experience that most local jurisdictions thrive on the shoulders of small business. They're generating economic development, jobs, and that's really what everybody wants at the end of the day. So in the U.S., you mentioned incentives in support of certain industries. So in the U.S., the trend is not just in support of industries, but also directly proportional to the size of the investment itself. So the larger the investment, the more breaks you can hope to get from banks. They're more accessible. You don't always go to the minister or the secretaries of finance. You have to deal with the local government where you're going to be located. So for businesses in this room that are interested in international investment, please do reach out to local government support for business investment. I think we're supposed to kind of wrap it up. I do want to give 2 minutes, maybe 1 minute for audience questions. But in the meantime, while you all are thinking, some final thoughts and words on, what the future of the Japan-India relationship looks like. What would you like to see now, and how would you like to work towards not waiting anymore?
It's a very difficult question because on the future we need to create. Yeah, so I want to make a more brighter future between Japan and India because I already invested in a lot of my time here. It's almost 20 years. So actually, Delhi is the longest city where I lived in the past. Yeah, so I need to believe Indian future, and I also come from Japan, so that I also need to believe Japanese future. But then somehow, many of the things we need to cross, and we also need to think about. But now, because of the lots of the drastic change is happening all across the world. So maybe one is the politics, geopolitics, and also the technologies, not only for the generative AI, but also the deep tech is coming, right? So all kinds of things is changing. So at certain time, we cannot just stick, okay, I'm on behalf of India, I'm on behalf of Japan, or something like that. So we need to see broader views and to see all across the world. And for example, so the climate change. So we cannot say this is a problem with India. This is a problem for US or something like that. So everybody need to think about the future of the more wider world. So I think that is a point which we need to consider, and how we can collaborate each other to solve the issue for future. So that is the things which I want to think about for next maybe 5 to 10 years.
Thank you very much for that. And closing thoughts from you, Mr. Kali.
Thank you, moderator. I think I want to start where Neil ended, and where he says we must think more collaboratively about the whole of this world and society. And I think your motto for the G20 and your DNA is that the human race is one family. Equally, in South Africa, we believe in Ubuntu, which means I am because of you, and that our existence is, you can't, my existence can't be divorced from yours, and so we have to coexist. And this is the importance of coexistence. We only have this one planet. We only have this one planet, and our survival depends on how we collaborate and cooperate. Competition is good. This is how we thrive. This is how businesses will grow. But the broader picture has to be, the lens with which we have to look at this is to put a human face on this interaction. As business people, you see, if you are into profits only and you forget about the environment, we will end up with this nightmare scenario that is painted for us. Equally, when it comes to health, if you do not address immunization in Africa and elsewhere, those health challenges there will impact you because of how interrelated we are. That's why a pandemic like COVID could spread the way it did. Because we are so interconnected. So we cannot have an isolationist approach. We must work collaboratively. You have shown, as India, many years ago in 1940, that you were concerned because of your appreciation of human values and life, human life, that you were the first country to raise the issue of apartheid at the UN, the first to impose economic sanctions against South Africa. You lost out of investments potential in Africa. But there was a moral sense, a moral consciousness that drove your decisions. And so I think business with morality, business with, I would even say, some form of spirituality, because we are interconnected human beings. If we can succeed in that, then I think our future is bright. Then we don't have to fear these artificial intelligence and what technology can potentially do, the threats they can have on humanity. Because our thinking is infused with this sense of responsibility towards others and human life. So our future is bright. There's many challenges ahead, but we have as humans the potential and the capacity to address these challenges collectively. And that's where I want to leave it. And we will depend on these young people. And so I was so happy that when I saw this young generation, because you must not allow these old people like myself to make decisions that will harm your futures. You must take an active role. Yesterday we addressed some students, I think they're from the School of Government, from MIT, and they're studying politics, and I was saying, wow, these are the decision makers of the future. You are the business decision makers, the ICT decision makers, but you play such an important role in our future. And you shouldn't wait until you become the big success. In fact, their motto says be the change. It's something they borrowed from Gandhiji. You are those agents of change. Take an interest in your world. This is your world. You will suffer most out of the ill-fated policies of governments if you do not take an interest, if you do not become an activist in your own right. Advocating for a much more just and equal world. That is my dream. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's a great way to end this conversation. And we're also at the end of our time. I think we have only time for one question. If somebody has a question about Japan or South Africa, or I volunteer for the United States and business Anybody? Okay, thank you very much, because that keeps us on time. I would like to thank my panelists for joining me. Thank you so much for your expertise. And with that, can we have a big round of applause for our speakers?
I request all the panelists to please come down so that we may have your
इस साइड है काम कर रहे हैं coming.
Friends, we'll quickly start the next session. May I request all of you to please settle down? We are about to start the next session here. May I request Mr. Vinay Nagpal, CEO of Criconet, USA, to please come on the stage. Mr. Nagpal, Mr. Buddy Reiser, Executive Director, Department of Economic Development, Loudoun County. Welcome, sir. It's nice to have you here once again. We also have with us Mr. Sudhir Kundar and Mr. Amit Singh. Mr. Sudhir Kundar is Chief Business Officer, DECI India, and Mr. Amit Singh is Senior Vice President, Engineering for Business Control as Data Center. Friends, please give a big round of applause to the next review. And they are going to talk about data centers and what potential they hold and what business opportunities they are going to provide in the years to come. And I distinctly remember this when I was in dance just also we had a session on. And some figures you had mentioned at that time, if I'm not wrong, like dollars or something like that. Maybe by this year the figures might have changed and it would be